Hi, this is Amy
and Melissa. We are a couple of retired Texas teachers who are CALTs, Certified Academic Language Therapists. We started our own businesses, and now we have a podcast called
The Dyslexia Duo. So join us for our informative podcast, where we'll delve into dyslexia, covering the topics that affect parents, therapists, teachers, practitioners, and anyone who wants to learn more. We'll guide you through everything you need to know, from the first signs to the intricacies of dyslexia curriculum placement and beyond.
This season, we will cover the referral process, what to expect when your child or student is dyslexic, the generational impacts of dyslexia, and how to support those affected.
Come join us! Thank you for joining us as we resume our discussion with author and college advocate for students with disabilities, Elizabeth Hamblet. So, kind of going to the dyslexia side.
Yeah.
In my experience, I did 30 years in public ed, and 27 of it was spent in some form of dyslexia education, either with students or educating teachers or whatever. I've had it come across in my situation before where a student is not identified with dyslexia until like 11th grade, right? Because they're probably pretty bright and, super high intelligence, but performing at the average level. And they may have to kind of just start, playing some catch up to meet their graduation requirements. So what do you recommend for those kids who aren't recommended until the later years of high school? Or I've even had come across in my private practice, a college kids say, hey, I think I'm dyslexic. Can we take a look at some of this? So what are some things you could recommend for those students who may be playing catch up in high school, or maybe as college students are thinking I might be dyslexic and it turns out they are dyslexic? I know it's a two-pronged question there.
Well, and also when you say, what do I recommend? What do I recommend they do? So,
yeah.
Okay. So first of all, as far as college entrance requirements. So for instance, now again, what I think I see more often is students who were identified not taking, who were identified, let's say before high school, not taking things like foreign language when they are in high school, because it will be extremely challenging for them. Yeah. This is where, and it's not specifically this that's stated, but part of 504 says that colleges don't have recipients of federal money, which is what colleges are. They don't have to do anything that fundamentally alters their programs. So colleges are allowed to set their entrance requirements. And unless they have somehow written them explicitly to keep out students with disabilities, and of course there are all kinds of disabilities that would be, I like to think, nearly impossible, they can require whatever they wish. And they do not have to make exceptions for students who identify themselves in their application in some way as having a disability. Now, just for those who are going to ask this question right now, they don't have to. There's nothing in the Common App, and colleges are not allowed to ask students who are applying if they have a disability. Students are always welcome to disclose that information if they wish in one way or another, but we cannot ask those questions. And so, truth be told, and we discussed this in chapter 6 of my book with some admissions directors, if they've gone to a specialized school. So, I have some buddies at the AIM Academy in Conshohocken, Pennsylvania. So when a student applies to college, not only does the transcript go that says you went to AIM, but there's each school, including public high schools, has what's called, I think, a school profile, which is a little summary of like how many students go to that school, where it's located, what kind of curriculum it has. And probably the school profile is going to identify that student, identify itself as a school that caters to students. What can you do about that? Nothing. Should you not send your kid to a school that will support them?
Right.
Because of where they might or might not get in? If that is a concern for your student, not for yourself, for your student.
Right.
And you need to ask them questions, and you can talk to the school about where graduates have gone. Do not consider it disqualifying, and see what the admissions director said in step 6. So to go back, so that's the first place. So I would imagine more for those identified late, they're probably already in those foreign language classes.
Yeah.
And so, you can that's a good opportunity for self-advocacy. We understand this is challenging for you, and even for those who were identified earlier. We understand foreign language is difficult for you, or if it's dyscalculia for a student with math classes. Have them do a search, do a little project, look at some colleges that they may have heard of that they think interest them. What are their admissions requirements? And would you rather take these classes and give them a try and know that they're at least on your transcript and that opens, possibilities to you? Or would you rather direct your search to places they don't require this? Now, here's some information I don't have and nobody does. Do students get in every year to colleges whose stated requirements say you got to have this many years of foreign language, this many foreign years of Latin, who don't? I've heard individual anecdotes about that. Yeah. But nobody's collecting data on that, even the colleges themselves.
Right.
So you may meet somebody who got into Hamblet University, even though my requirement said you have to have 4 years of high school foreign language, but you don't know why they got into my school. Maybe, and this is something that you can read about in just general books about college admission, maybe my university has a new computer science program and that student said they wanted to major in computer science and that boosted them. Maybe they play bassoon and the orchestra really needs one. So it's a couple of things. First of all, colleges are not required to do any testing for students. They have a dyslexia. Well, you know that, Amy, but not everybody knows. Colleges are not required to do any testing. So students who think they might have a disability have to get testing on their own. And there are ways to do that for lower prices. And I will send you a link to Understood, which suggests some ways to get it at a reduced cost. Some schools, again, in just talking to students, and I don't know how common this is, will determine for themselves whether they think the student is eligible for accommodations. I don't think that's widespread, but it's possible. And then, I have met over many years of doing this work some really resourceful students. So sometimes they shop their classes really, really extensively and carefully and figure out, there's not that much reading in this class that will satisfy that requirement. That's not always going to be a possibility. I mean, I don't know how much time students do this, but it's been interesting. I've met graduate students who have said, I picked a college where it was mostly projects and papers and not a lot of exams. Now, I don't know how you do that research because it seems very challenging to me given the range of
I was about to ask for a database of all that.
Right, programs that schools offer, but this is what they tell me. So students can be really resourceful in that way. But also just, look, there are free tools that are available, right? Like Read Naturally.
Read Naturally.
Thank you. So that can help you get through. Some of my students watch YouTube videos to learn how to do math problems. Like there's all sorts of resourceful ways to get through.
Yeah, I know. I personally took the easiest, well, I shouldn't say easiest, the most compatible for me math class to get out of college. And it really helped me learn the basics of math that I needed to learn. And I didn't need to do it to be a language therapist. I needed to know enough to get out of college.
Sure.
So,
I was just having the math conversation with my daughter because she has to take her final in her math class. And I said, I was lucky when I went to college. I said, because when I went to high school, you only had to have 2 years of math. And I said, and when I went to college, because I was elementary ed, my math was elementary ed, math for elementary ed teachers. It was just the basics, how to teach it, so that you wouldn't fall flat on your face. In another pod, I think we had talked about when I got my master's, I deliberately researched colleges that wouldn't make me take the GRE, because I was afraid of the math part. And I found one that if I had a 3.0 or better for the first 9 hours, then I wouldn't have to take it. And I was like, great. And I made sure I had a 3.0 or better.
And that's the resourcefulness, going back to the high school kids looking at colleges. That fundamental alteration that we talked about. So we don't have to alter our admissions requirements. And then even if a student gets into college, let's say Hamblet University requires 2 years of high school foreign language, you get in without having taken it. I can require you to take it to graduate. And I've seen some state university policies particularly that do this. So you could get into my college and say, well, hey, Elizabeth, I have dyslexia. I'm never going to pass your college, Spanish classes. if I have gone through a process, and we'd like to think that a lot of colleges have, of determining our essential requirements. So remember, students not only have to meet requirements for their major, but also and often for the general ed requirements or core requirements of any college. So you're not just looking at what do I have to do to be a speech and language therapist, you're looking at, and also how do I get out of Hamblet University? And you shouldn't assume, always ask, but that they're going to get a substitution. And so what this could mean for students, again, who want to make this choice, is they look at colleges that don't require those things they find really challenging. So I have 2 young adult children, one of whom went to art school, the other of whom went to engineering school. And they did not have to take all those core requirements. I did, and I was laughing at while Melissa was talking about math. I went to a school that, at least at the time, it was two classes in any combination of science and or math. And I got out of college by taking physical anthropology, in which I got a B, and biological psych, where I scraped a C with the help of a friend who was a psych major. But I don't know what made me take calc. It was like, okay, that was the lowest level math in my college. And I mean, you've never seen a professor so happily or quickly sign a drop form in your life. She was sort of like, honey, I don't know how you ended up here, but you definitely need to go. And we agreed on that. So
we've all been there, haven't we? We can all relate.
I mean, I can only speak for myself. So I think those are options too. And, but if students don't think about that, or if they're so focused on, I have to go to these 50 colleges everybody else has heard of because that will make me, and that's a fine decision to make. My whole point is I want them to make it from a position of education and understanding and self-knowledge, and not, that these are the possibilities.
So consider all avenues. Consider what you want to major in, what's going to work best with you, in the way of everything.
Yeah, and I mean, this notion, people have of like, well, I'm going to find out how the teachers teach there. And in fact, in LinkedIn somewhere, I had put up my post a colleague had written for me about deadline extensions and why they're not commonly approved. And somebody had commented, in good faith, and said, well, that's why UDL, Universal Design for Learning, is so important. And students can ask about UDL when they look at colleges. And it sounds good on the face of it, and maybe I am being too cynical about it. And I don't mean cynical like I don't think it works, but I'd be surprised if UDL includes the concept of everybody gets as much time as they want to do all assignments in every class. Yeah. I don't think that's realistic. Back to the lab example.
Yeah.
And so it is a challenge to figure out what learning environment is going to be great for you, right? A lot of schools have cut down the size of their lecture halls from when Amy and I were in college in the 80s. So that can be a thing, but it's not always going to be small group discussions. It's not always going to be, the professors instead of TAs running certain things. So it's getting a good enough fit. Nothing's going to be perfect. And I think that's also something people ask me all the time. Well, what's the best college for students with dyslexia?
There you go. That's my question I was going to ask. Okay, I'm glad you said it.
Yeah. And that's an impossible question to answer, because you guys know that no 2 students with dyslexia are alike. So the college consultants that I put my stock in, because I don't do college advising, and the disability services directors that I spoke to, and I think that's important, all had the same advice, which is you need to find a college that fits in the way that all students need, right? It's got to be the right size, the right location, social life or no social life, whatever it is, because you live there.
Yeah.
And you find your people there.
Yeah.
And from there, you can look at the size of the disability services office, how many people work there. Again, you're not typically, but I've heard people have accomplished this, be able to find out before you've gotten in and enrolled what accommodations your student will have, because a lot of schools do not have the staffing to have these conversations with students who aren't even accepted yet.
Yeah.
So I have heard individual anecdotes about that happening, but I don't think it's widespread. As with everything in life, it never hurts to ask.
Right.
But then, figure it out. Understand back to what do they need to know? The expectations. They'll read the same books. Can they use technology to do it? Yes. But keep in mind, Our job is to provide access. So here's one of the nuances. So if you are approved for anything you need to read for classes, your texts and articles in an accessible format, that is the accommodation. If you wanted Read and Write Gold to utilize to read those things aloud to you, that is something we actually don't have to provide. So in 504, the explanation, the section about auxiliary aids says we don't have to provide, you know, Amy, but not everybody does, that we don't have to provide anything that's a personal service or device. Yeah. And so while it doesn't specifically say text-to-speech software, because that law was written in 1973, that is what we mean. So one of the things, if it interests your student, that they can ask is, do you guys give copies of that software for free? Some schools buy what's called a site license, or forget what else.
I think that's right.
And anybody who's found eligible can get it. Now, it doesn't mean everybody who asks for it will get it. And I've heard tell of some colleges that put it on the system available to all students. So as long as you have a Hamblet University ID, you log in. You know how students, when they start college, they get access to the Microsoft Suite. Yeah. It's like, you know, Word and Excel, that they also get access that way. That's a question to ask.
Yeah. Okay.
But, you know, I think, again, I have no evidence for this, but in my head, I think that the disability stuff often matters more to the parents than to the students, often because parents have spent years advocating for this stuff.
It's hard to let go.
So that is understandable. And again, if you're having these meetings in high school and your student is not utilizing the accommodations, perhaps you encourage them to try them and see how they like it, but do not let investigating the disability services, these colleges, drive the way you talk to your student about colleges, because it doesn't matter how good the office is if they're not interested.
Wow. That makes sense.
You know, if they're never going to talk to us, or if they do, they'll register for their accommodations, and this happens every year. Wisely, some students register with us, and for whatever reason, they actually never fill out that form and get their extended test time. That's a perfectly fine decision to make. It's their decision. But I think sometimes parents say, well, you got to go here because they have this. Only if it matters to the student.
Right. And I think that's what we need to remember when we send our kids off to college.
Yeah.
That's a big learning curve.
It's a good time to remind myself to say, parents are wonderful. Parents are lovely. Parents are supportive. And everything parents do, I understand they do because they think it's what's best for their student. I'm not an expert on your student. You are.
Right.
I'm not here to criticize what you're doing or to cast any, aspersions on it. I want you to know what this environment looks like and evaluate for yourself where your student is and what they will need to be successful.
Right.
So to your point, Amy, FERPA, the Family Educational Rights Privacy Act, is something you probably learn about when your student hits 18 in high school, if they do, where now they get to sign off on everything.
Yep.
Well, what it means at college is we can't send you anything, and to your point, Amy, but the bill.
Yeah.
Without your student's permission. We are very happy and have the ability to send you that bill, but nothing else.
Yeah.
So then people say, well, I'm going to make my kids sign a FERPA release. Okay. So interestingly, at some schools, different departments have their own releases. Some schools have a universal one. But as many people in my field will say, a release is not a FERPA obligation. And so what that means is just because you now have the ability to call me and ask me, and it's not me, not in my position, but my colleagues, the coordinators, the question doesn't mean that I have to go hunt down information I don't have. So if you want to say, how is Elizabeth doing in her that calc class I dropped? It's not coordinator's job. This isn't high school IDEA case management anymore.
Right.
And so the answer will be, I actually don't have access to that information. You should ask your student how they're doing. And so again, maybe you want to share with us, Amy. If my mother or father had tried to email my professor to say, hey, how's Elizabeth doing?
Yeah.
Professors are always welcome. Actually, let me think about this, I guess. It's a good question. Like, would a professor check a FERPA release? This is not part of my job. Would a professor check a FERPA release if they wanted to share that with
you?
and just weren't sure, maybe. And if your student hadn't signed whatever FERPA release the professor needed, perhaps they would not, even if they wanted to.
Wow.
And some of them wouldn't. So you want to share your story of trying to, I mean, that's comfortable for
Well,
you?
I mean, this was actually with my oldest. It was our first one who had gone off to A&M, and was in the Corps and all of that. And we were seeing his grades. And so I emailed his supervisor, his commanding officer or whatever, and it never responded. And I'm like, what is Brandon doing? Is he going to study hall? And because I had study hall and all that because it was the Corps. And I got no response. And I think it was somebody at one of the schools I taught at. They go, well, of course they're not going to respond to you. What were you thinking? I was thinking I paid the bill. But why not? I'm still his parent.
I laugh, not.
I know.
Just to empathize. Like, they sent me the bill though.
Yeah, and when I asked my child, "Are you going to study hall, study sessions with the rest of the Corps?" He's like, "Yeah." No, he wasn't. His grades showed he wasn't doing it, and and it just wasn't for him. It just wasn't for him, and we learned the hard way by sending him to a really expensive university. That's when we started sending to community college after that.
And for those of us who are not Aggies, just what's a Corps?
It's like, what's the Corps, Greg? Help me.
It's like the military.
It is like the military. It's like when you join, It's like ROTC.
Okay.
It's like ROTC.
ROTC. Yep. Okay, got it. All right.
Yeah.
I didn't know if that was like the drill team or, marching band.
And it's pretty strict, their requirements, what they have to do throughout the day.
Yeah. And so, and that's an interesting point, right? So to stay on your athletic teams, to stay in your sorority fraternity, to be on certain things, students have to sometimes keep their grades up. Yeah. And there's a fundamental alteration thing. They don't have to have a lower GPA requirement for students with disabilities. And so like any college, usually after the first term, students are there. Based on their GPA, they may put a student on probation and say, you have a semester or whatever the term is to get your grades up. Here are the things we recommend you do. Sometimes things are required. I don't know, maybe required. And if your student does not do that, they don't get invited back.
Yeah.
They get dismissed.
Yeah.
And that GPA is not lower because we do not alter our expectations for students with disabilities.
Right.
We provide them accommodations to help them. In the auxiliary aids section, it says something to the effect of, aids are intended to provide equal opportunity, but not essentially equal results.
Right. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
Hi, this is Melissa with Kids First Dyslexia Services. I am excited to share with you my private practice. Kids First Dyslexia Services is a private practice that specializes in dyslexia therapy. Each one-on-one session focuses on instruction specific to your child's needs in a nurturing environment that develops self-esteem, builds confidence, and fosters a sense of accomplishment, resulting in happier kids with higher levels of achievement. We provide a professional, personalized experience, always putting the child first. We value the relationships with both our students and parents because strengthening skills and overcoming hurdles to achieve desired goals and success is a team effort. For more information, please visit www.kidsfirstdyslexia.com. That is www.kidsfirstdyslexia.com.
Hi there. This is Amy Rodenroth, owner of Discovery Dyslexia Services. So tell me if any of these situations are familiar to you. Your dyslexia teacher/therapist has suddenly retired unexpectedly, and you do not have the personnel to fill the space. Or you do not have enough trained teachers or therapists for the number of students who have qualified for dyslexia services, and you need a trained teacher or therapist quickly, like yesterday quickly. Or you need a teacher to provide compensatory services, and you do not have anyone that can provide what's needed. Well, what do? I'm going to tell you what you can do. You can call Discovery Dyslexia Services. Discovery Dyslexia Services can help you with your various dyslexia concerns. We have multiple CALTs who can provide virtual small group therapy. We can also train your teachers in most dyslexia curricula, either virtually or on site. Just let us know how we can help support you. For more information, go to our website at www.discoveread.com. Let me spell that for you. DYSCOVEREAD.com. I don't know, it's a funny name, but we're providing huge services for our dyslexic population. So keep in mind, Discovery Dyslexia Services, covering all your dyslexia needs. Let's return to the show.
I was just going to piggyback on and say I was surprised to learn, too, that there are no accommodations set up for the application process either. And so I think
that was an interesting question.
Yeah, so I thought, I know we talked about this pre our visit today, but I thought for sure there would be some accommodations set up for like maybe extra time on the written expression or, a lesser amount of writing requirements for the written essay or something like that. That was just my interpretation of maybe what could be provided. So I was kind of surprised that there was not any kind of accommodations there.
Well, thinking about in a way, this is a great application of the, idea of executive functioning and time management and all those skills your students need. Because they're not, it's not like the SAT. They're not filling in their college applications, right, in a specific setting on a certain day, right, in a specific amount of time. So students have as long as they want, essentially, once because I don't work in admissions, I don't know a lot of stuff, but like the common application and other schools that have their own, like it's released, I think in the summer, what their application looks like, what the required essays are. But, to your point, Melissa, right. If there are 3 essays that every student has to write, they have to write them. They don't get to write fewer essays. And certainly there's a maximum number of words for some of those essays. I don't know if there's a minimum because I don't do admissions, and I was lucky enough to have a friend who helped my kids with their college admissions, which is why my kids still talk to me. Yep. Great consultant. So that's an interesting question. So there was just an article in the Wall Street Journal. My friend Ellen Broughton was featured, and she's wonderful. If you haven't read Bright Kids Who Couldn't Care Less and Bright Kids Who Can't Keep Up, she's a processing speed expert, and she's awesome.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
What's
she's
her
awesome.
name?
Ellen Broughton, Braaten. And one of the things she said in this interview was, students are losing the natural opportunities for developing executive functioning skills because of the way we've structured their lives. Mm-hmm. But the college application process could be a perfect opportunity for that. Talking to your kids about, when is this stuff due? Do you need somebody to look at your essays? It's not a good idea, before you send this stuff in, and work with your student on how to break this stuff down. Because that is what they will have to do on their own moving forward. And this is, if they want you to pay all that money for them to go to college, if you are paying, and not everybody is, then there are things that you expect them to be able to do. Mm-hmm. There are some cautionary tales from parents who drag their kids through the application process. And when the kids got to college, they just weren't ready. They didn't want to be there for a lot of reasons. And so this is an opportunity to say, well, if this is so important to you that you want me to spend tens of thousands of dollars, then you have to show me that this is something you're prepared to work on.
And I can see how that application would be daunting because it's just sitting, especially if you have executive functioning issues, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's like a big old forest. And you just can't get through the big old forest because you can't figure out how to tackle this, Right. And I think setting them up, especially in high school, when they have a project, do this in this time period, and this in this time period, could lend itself, maybe, I may be wrong, to something like the college application process.
Absolutely. And this is so that you've got to seize those natural opportunities to do. People will say to me, well, what's a good executive functioning program my kid can do in the summer? And some folks, have commented that the problem with it is it's such an artificial environment. I'm not trying to discourage anybody from doing it, but just be aware that it doesn't necessarily lend itself to the kinds of things but maybe they learn some skills in there that that if they're really dedicated to it, they can apply. So there is this wonderful tool that a colleague showed me years ago that I use with my students, and I think you could apply to this, modify it. So there are online assignment planners or assignment but calculators, and the best way to look for one is to use the words university assignment calculator, even though they might be called a planner, only because then you'll get like 5 pages of Google results with pretty little planners to use. Yeah. And so what you do is you say, here's the date I'm going to start, here's the date it's due, and the one that I show my students has a drop down. It's a research essay, it's a critical thinking essay, whatever it is. And it generates a schedule.
Cool.
It says by March 5th, you do this. By March 10th, you do this. And what is important about this, and this is where we start to, get students involved in self-advocacy, is maybe it's broken it down. Like in the first day is often like, think about the assignment. I've got my hands up like I'm meditating, like think about the assignment. Okay, I've thought about it. Okay, what's the next step? So they can look through the deadlines that are there and say, I don't really need this. But then what do they do with that? They get it on their calendar. Every week at the start of the week, you guys say, and what's on your calendar for this week? So we teach these skills at home. We start to say, there's a great post on Attitude that I post every once in a while about Sunday meetings. Mm-hmm. So that Sunday nights, families get together and they say, who's got this to do? And I was doing that with my kids in high school before I read this article, but because, this is what I do. Like, all right, I'm going out this week. Here's what's happening with dinner. Do you need a ride somewhere? It starts to teach students this, this strategy of starting the week by looking at the calendar and say, oh, what's coming up?
Yeah.
And those can be really, really good habits to get them into.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I wish we had, I'm going to actually show that to my daughter to help her with some of her assignments. No, that's wonderful. Okay, so going back to learning disabilities or dyslexia or anything like that, a lot of times I've noticed that parents are hesitant to get their child identified with dyslexia or any other learning disability, even in elementary, because they're worried about the implications it could have later. Like to biographize, when my daughter was getting close to graduating high school, I had teachers who told me, oh, she won't get a diploma from high school if it shows that she was in special education. And I went, that's not right. That's not even close to being right. Why would we offer something like that?
Well, yeah. I mean, and so again, I haven't done K through 12 stuff since the 90s. So, I want to be careful about what I say, but my memory is that in some states you earn a standard diploma. Sometimes is it a modified diploma? So, but that depends on what classes they're taking. Mm-hmm. So I would think the majority of students who take classes in the general ed setting, mm-hmm. and even those who may take one or two in a specialized setting where curriculum is modified, earn a standard high school diploma. But it is important for families to know if their students, and again, check with your high school. If they're in all or majority modified classes, perhaps they're not going to earn a standard high school diploma. It is important for families to get the facts.
And I appreciate that you provided that difference, because I think the teacher I was talking to was making a blanket statement. I'm like, no, she's taking... Scary. Right. I was like, she just needs an aide in the room with her to make sure she's turning things in and to check for understanding. That's it. She's still sitting in the classroom with everybody.
Yeah, so that was somebody who really didn't know their stuff. That's
it was a special ed person. Mm.
Well, I think...
Wow, okay. So moving on from that. So let's start with... Let's start with the basics, because I see people telling each other all sorts of things online. So one of the things you'll hear is, oh, when your kid's going into high school, get them off the IEP or 504 mm-hmm. because it will be on their transcript. And again, what's really unfair, I think, and I understand it comes from anxiety and ignorant things that parents may have heard over time. It comes with the assumption that every single college is trying to keep out students with disabilities, and that's just not true. Mm. And it's really I think, very presumptuous about the people working at colleges that they don't want to have these students. Like, that's kind of a, biased thing to say about them.
Right.
And so are there people working in college admissions offices that don't want students with disabilities and aren't involved in their way of thinking? I'm sure, just like there are in any field, right? So you're never going to get rid of all of that. So let's start with the basics. The only thing that can be on the transcript is if your student took a class where curriculum was modified.
Okay.
Now, that could include a gifted class if they have those.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So basically, if that's not the case, nothing that the high school sends to the college with your student's application will indicate that they had an IEP or a 504. So then people say to me, well, but, what about, isn't there an asterisk? No, there isn't. And I'm going to keep a little bit of stuff for chapter 6 that you can read as far as what else can be in the record, and also how admissions directors spoke about how they look at transcripts, how they look at school reports. So keep that in mind. But I will tell you, the school's not going to send your kid's IEP or 504 with the application. That's just not a thing that happens.
Right.
So it comes back to the only way the college can know really specifically that your student has a disability is if your student tells them.
Okay.
Now, so don't take them off their 504s and IEPs going into high school for fear of that. And also don't take them off senior year, which is another one I see, because you think it's going to be on. It's not going to be your high school is not sending that stuff to us.
And surely don't avoid getting them tested for dyslexia.
Oh, I'm sorry. Right. It was back to the identification. Oh my gosh.
In elementary school.
Oh, yeah. Your student can go to college. It's going to be easier for them if they've developed the strategies and skills they need. And you're not going to be able to do that if you haven't figured out if they have a disability. So yes, thank you. That's what I mean. There's so much information and everybody says stuff like they're experts or like they know something. And I have a post on myths about admission because I see this stuff and I just keep thinking there's no data for that. Nobody's collecting that data.
Yeah,
Stop
that's
doing
good
that.
to know. That's good to know. You kind of live in fear when you hear multiple people saying the same thing. You go, oh, okay, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about.
Which brings us back to the thing we started with is how do I get people to seek out information that contradicts what they've heard?
Yeah,
right. And Amy and I's mission on this podcast is to provide true and accurate information about dyslexia, learning disabilities, that we can help everybody be educated as much as possible. And we're not the know-alls. We get you guys
far cry
who,
from it.
you guys are the ones who are out there working in these trenches and are experienced with all aspects of the dyslexia spectrum, not just dyslexia itself, because it touches every corner of our world. We need to know all of this information. So that is our goal. And that's why I'm so thankful you were here on the show. Not that I want to wrap it up yet because we have a couple more questions, but I am so thankful that you were here on the show to share your information with us.
I appreciate the chance to reach your audience. That's why I like to do this stuff. It's, it's just more people hopefully will get the right information and share it with their friends.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you one other question about kind of going back to the parents. I was a parent that I had a hard time letting go of supporting my son. I mean, he's 24 and I still want to know where he is all the time. And he's shut me off Find My Friends, which that's a whole nother problem I've got.
we had that too.
But thinking about the parents who are sending their kid off to college, and they have been the parents that have been these big advocates of their child all throughout their school career, is there such a thing as a parent support group for these parents once their child gets into school?
It's funny. There isn't. And I have had that question from more than one parent. I run a Facebook group, but it is fact-based. It is just like it's focused on accommodations at college and a little bit on transition. And it's just I can answer questions like the ones we've talked about today. But for parents to support each other, specifically for a group with students with disabilities, I'm not aware of one. And I've tried to float that idea to some people I know, and nobody's biting. So, the beautiful thing about Facebook is it's like when you guys both have taken kids to college tours, and they take the kids on the tours and they say, and we have 400 clubs. And if there's one that you want that isn't here, you can start your own club. Well,
Yeah.
the beauty of Facebook is you can start your own community right there.
That's true.
And if you do, please let me know and I'll share that information. I specifically run my community so that it will not suck up all of my time. And that's why it is kind of closed commenting. Ask me a question, I will answer it. I will also sort of share some things that I find as that I come along when I'm doing research for a project. But it's a place where you can ask that question. You can do so anonymously and I will answer it. But obviously, for those of you who haven't sent a kid to college, many colleges have a parent Facebook group. They can be wild. And
Wild,
part of
Wild
the reason
West, huh?
yeah. So use those to the extent to which they work for you. But I have seen, or seen people in other professional groups talking about the comments they see in parent groups, and they are not always spaces for people to be understanding and kind.
Yeah, I believe that. What's the name of your Facebook group?
The group is called College Transition and Accommodations Information for Parents. So it's as busy as people want it to be when they ask me questions, or sometimes, like I said, I drop stuff in there. Usually quarterly, I do a giveaway, and we have a weekly nonsense poll just to keep things light. But I think there's a lot of stuff happening out there as far as parenting groups. So it would be great if somebody would start that group. I don't have the time. But also, if you find one, I think the thing to be cautious about, again, is people speaking as though they are experts.
Yeah.
So the reason that I keep commenting off in my group is I actually inherited this group, so to speak, from the parents who started it who were moving on. And I was spending so much time correcting misinformation about 504s and there, so like one thing we didn't even get to in this interview, I can't believe it. So we'll wrap it up with this. IEPs and 504 plans are not valid once your student graduates from high school. And that is an essential fact to know. IDEA does not apply at the college level.
Right.
And so even though this wording is not included in IDEA anywhere that I am aware of, and please, if it does, please send it to me so I can quote it, your IEP expires essentially when your student either graduates from high school or, in some cases, ages out of the system. They no longer have an IEP. Now, those who age out and aren't headed to college get other kinds of plans, but that's not my area. But essentially, it expires. It is a piece of paper with history, and some colleges will ask to see it as a form of documentation. Others will not. Doesn't mean that students can't include it when they register with us if they would like to, but we are not obligated to do anything that was written into that plan just because it was in that plan.
Right.
Because that's another thing I see people asking. Sometimes other friends who run groups ask me to be in theirs, and a parent will say, what should I make sure is written into my kid's senior year IEP to make sure they get it in college? It does not work like that.
Yeah.
We determine what accommodations are appropriate based on what we see in the documentation. And again, all of those things we've just spent all this time discussing. Is it appropriate at the college level? Is it a fundamental alteration? Is it just something that we don't have to do because of what we expect for, students? Like Melissa asked why they're surprised that there's no accommodation for the college application process. There's no supports for like filling out our forms either.
Yeah.
If you don't get your housing request in on time, you don't get housing, or you don't get the housing you want.
True.
So that kind of stuff I think is really important. And importantly, 504 plans also expire when your students graduate from high school. K through 12 is under subpart D. Colleges are under subpart E, and they are vastly different in their mandates.
I don't think I knew that.
You're not alone, Amy. So that's what you'll see online. Get your kid off the IEP senior year. Get them on a 504 because 504s are valid at college. No, they are not.
That's what I heard. That's what
No,
they
they are
told
not.
me. Yeah.
Once again, they can serve as a form of documentation if the college wants to see it, but we don't always. And we're still not obligated to provide anything that's written into a 504. It's so important to know that because, again, knowledge is power. Your student will have to register with us. They will have to ask for it. But just piling a bunch of stuff into their senior year plan does not mean you have guaranteed they will get those things in college, because somebody wrote it into a legal plan.
Wow. So I so wish I had had you in my life when I was running a district and when my kids were starting college, because
Ooh.
I felt like I was just flapping my wings.
Well, I'm hoping folks who listen to this will find my website, read what's there. Even better, I mean, the book is the best way to learn everything I know. And then follow me somewhere on social media, because sometimes I'm adding stuff or I'm doing a research project. I'm doing a webinar or presenting in another state. And one of the things I do is look at their state flagship, usually Disability Services Office. And maybe I find like a really interesting list of accommodations and I'll post that stuff.
Yeah.
And also resources from other people that I think are great.
Can you give us your exact website too, just to make sure that we have it?
So it's LD Advisory, as in learning disabilities. So that's LDADVISORY.com. But if you look for my name, it should hopefully turn up.
Okay, sounds great. And your book is The 7 Steps to College Success.
Mm-hmm. And there's also for those of us old enough to remember it, and I think it still exists, like essentially a Reader's Digest version of this by a different publisher.
Oh.
But it's a 6-page laminated guide that essentially it's like the greatest hits of all of this stuff. I think it's a much better resource for students. I don't expect students to read my book. I don't think most of them are that interested. But it's a 6-page handout, essentially. It's you can order online. And it gives all the bullet points about this stuff. So I think for students, it's probably the amount of information they need and not more.
Yeah.
I have 2 webinars that are available online. People can watch anytime. And if they subscribe to my newsletter or they join my Facebook group, there's a discount for that. And so one is my overview presentation that I give most commonly, talking about the laws and students' responsibilities, documentation a little bit, and about the application process and what to think about when looking for schools, and also accommodations. And then another one that dives much more deeply into accommodations that aren't approved, and because there's just wasn't time in the other one. So there's a little bit of overlap between those. And so if somebody wants to watch both of them, they can email me or use the contact form on my site, and I will give them a special discount to watch both. It's just too complicated to do it for both as of right now, but I may change that if I get some time. So it's, and I give these presentations, to your point, Amy, I give these presentations for school districts and organizations, so you can hire me to do this stuff. But, part of what I have the privilege of being able to do, thanks to my husband's full-time job, is make all of this stuff available for free. Yeah. So like I said, there are over 50 posts on my website that will give people a lot of information. Also, I forgot to mention, if you go to free resources on my website and click down a little, there's tools for college students. So there's a whole time management page. There's how to study, how to read, and all that stuff is free. Wow. And then my YouTube channel, I have done a bunch. I've tried to enter the world of TikTok, so I have a bunch of short videos for people who'd rather watch than read. And then when I can, I get folks to do webinars, or I just do Q&As with them. All sorts of smart people offering their advice for families. So there's lots of free stuff if you want it. And if you want more and you want to support my work, buy something. But, everything's available.
Thank you.
This is
My
amazing. This is, I told myself I wasn't going to say the word amazing anymore. This is wonderful. So I've noticed in podcasts, I say that too much. This is wonderful, though. I truly, truly mean it from the bottom of my heart. This is information that was a big gap in my knowledge base, I feel like. And I really, really, truly appreciate everything you've provided for us today and for our audience.
Thank you for this opportunity. Like I said, it's so important to me to make sure more people know about this, and hopefully the effect, will fan out across the country, because it's so important, and it's just a challenge I continue to struggle with. How do we get this information to people? So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to your audience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Dyslexia Duo podcast hosts are Amy Rodenroth.
Melissa Dean.
Our producer is Greg Rodenroth.
You can find us on Facebook at The Dyslexia Duo.
Email us any questions or comments at thedyslexiaduo@gmail.com.
Awareness is so important. Share this podcast with your friends
Family,
and teachers.
thanks for joining us.
Bye.